Welcome to Tarot for Writers. I'm very glad to be sharing this with you today. And over the course of the next about hour and a half, we're going to talk about why tarot is a helpful tool for a writer and all the different ways. Okay, we won't cover all the different ways that you can use it, but we will cover some different approaches you can use to incorporate tarot into your work, whether you are already using tarot somewhat in your life or you have never picked up a tarot deck at all. I had a tarot deck in my house for 20 years that sat here and I never used it because I thought it just, I didn't have the expertise or the knowledge, or that I hadn't been educated by a witch in order to use them, until I realized that I could use them. And I didn't have to know everything about tarot for the cards to be powerful and meaningful for me. So I want to share that with you. And I'll be taking you through a few different ways of using tarot, and we'll practice doing this together. But first, what is tarot? In a historical sense, or in a literal sense, tarot is an art form. It's an object, 78 pieces of paper usually, and an art form, a kind of object that emerged in the 1400s in Italy among the wealthy. And what was happening in Italian villages and cities at that time is that sometimes they would have these parades where different people would dress up in the same way that, like, obviously not the size of Mardi Gras, right? But similar concept where you see these different themes or these different representations or personas that would move through the parade. And so a lot of the cards in tarot, or 22 of them, have some connection to archetypes like that. So the Fool, the Emperor, the Hierophant, those were things that appeared in some of these parades that were then translated into this art form that was originally used to play games. You know, among wealthy families, they became these like objects to art, and later they evolved to be used for divination. So it's a set of images that depict archetypes that represent the human experience. I also see tarot as a visual portal for investigation and curiosity, which is so crucial to our creativity. Tarot also provides a different language for storytelling. So everyone here tonight is familiar with the struggle and the joy and the excitement of telling and receiving stories. And I'm sure many of you can attest that storytelling is medicine in a lot of ways. And tarot is a storytelling device, but it doesn't use our written language so much. It uses visual language, and therefore it kind of lands for us in a slightly different place. I also see tarot as a mirror that reveals and shows to us things that maybe we already know, but that we're not fully believing, or possibilities that we might not have thought of, but that are just as true as the ones that we've already perceived. I also see tarot as an invitation to see and be more than what we thought was possible. So my work with tarot, like I said, it was not something I've been doing my whole life and not something I knew how to do for my whole life. But the moment that tarot entered my life, there's definitely a before and an after that I feel very distinctly. And tarot has absolutely helped me expand in ways that I used to think I could not expand. And that's one of the main reasons that I share it with you, so that you can have that hopefully same beautiful experience. So I want to dive into this idea of the archetype first for a second. And I think, you know, you probably all know kind of what I'm referring to more or less, but just to sort of be more specific with it, an archetype is a recurring symbol or motif. Another definition is that an archetype is a statement, a pattern of behavior, a prototype, a first form, a main model that other statements, behavior patterns, and objects will copy, emulate, or merge into, which is a very kind of dry, scientific sounding way of talking about an archetype. But basically, one reason I find them so fascinating is that they're sort of created by the collective of humanity. So we come into the world where archetypes have existed for many, many eons, and they've been repeated and reanimated by different people in different cultures over many generations. And so in one sense, we're kind of held captive to the archetypes that humans have created collectively, but there are also really an infinite number of archetypes that we can play with and investigate. Jill, when you were talking about writing, oh, did you put it in the chat? I knew I would forget that amazing phrase.
Oh, and the saltwater folktale.
Saltwater folktale. So Jill's like writing about life under the ocean with mermaids and magical beings who live under the water. And so that's rich with all kinds of specific archetypes that were related to the overarching archetype of the ocean. And then Carl Jung, who the more you get to know tarot, the more you'll see that Carl Jung and tarot have a really close connection. Carl Jung investigated and believed in and participated in like paranormal experience in his life. It was a great big part of his spiritual understanding of psychology. And he talks about the collective unconscious, the archetypes that we'll see in tarot or that we see elsewhere are very primal human kinds of symbols. So even some of the things that we would see early humans depict on cave walls, like those are archetypes and very early archetypes in human development. But they come from our collective understanding. So even people across cultures, across languages can still look at a certain figure or a certain symbol of this world and recognize it as being filled with meaning that's far greater than like its literal connotation. So it carries all of this knowledge that isn't actually super defined, but has a lot of like content contained in it. And so tarot is a collection of archetypes. And when you put the cards in different order, you see these archetypes interact with each other. And then we all have our own specific experiences with these different archetypes. And, you know, the people you know have specific experiences with these archetypes too. So we're going to start with this concept. And what I would like for you to do is take 4 minutes and think about the archetypes that show up in your work. This could be archetypes that kind of recur in your work over a long period of time, like since you started writing. You could write down archetypes that are showing up in your work lately. You can also jot down any archetypes that you're consciously trying to work out. So if you are writing a memoir or a piece of historical fiction, there may be certain things that you're actually trying to investigate, like the human compulsion toward violence or self-destruction or the human quest for love. So any archetypes that come up for you, go ahead and jot those down. Just make a list for the next 4 minutes. You can also give them names, as you'll see down here. So like the jilted lover is a kind of archetype. And you can also maybe phrase your archetypes as questions, like what does intentional community look like in a distant future? So take a few minutes to make that list. Okay, take about another 10 seconds if you need it. I'm having trouble with my screens on the presentation. Can y'all see anything right now?
I just see a white bar.
Okay, thank you. Anything? Not now. I'm gonna try this again. Um, while I'm trying to figure this out, go ahead and take your tarot deck and hold it in your hands. And close your eyes for a few moments as you hold your deck. And take 5 slow, deep breaths. Just feeling the cards in your hands, feeling into your body, feeling a connection between yourself and the deck. And just say in your mind a few words of hello, a greeting of some kind. Say thanks to your deck for being part of your life. Um, and maybe say something to your deck about the archetypes that you listed, some holistic thing you noticed, or make a joke to your deck, whatever comes to mind. And when you're ready, ask your deck, send this question into the cards as an intention. Please show me an archetype in my work that I should attend to this year. And take your time to select a card. And once you've chosen it, leave it face down. Once you have your card, I'm going to have you turn it over. And what I want you to do is, before you turn it over, make a decision to receive this message in the card rather than letting your brain jump into the action of making a story about what this card is or what it's trying to say to you. Make a decision to have no attachment to whatever the card is going to be. So sometimes we want to see, oh, this like the Empress or something like amazing and beautiful and sexy and exciting. And not all the cards bring that energy, but all of the cards are valuable. So make a decision to not be attached to whatever may show up. We're not going to take this card personally. And when you are ready, I want you to turn it over and just study the card. Just look at it. I'm going to have you look at it for a full minute, starting now. Look at the details, the colors, the angles. Notice any moods or symbols or the environment. Just receive this visual information. Okay, that was 1 minute. And I'm curious how that felt just to look at a card for a full minute. Notice in yourself if that was easy or difficult, if you wanted to look away, if your mind started to interject. Sometimes I was just thinking like how hard it can be to like hold a plank for a minute with your abs clenched tight. And I almost feel like even looking at a tarot card for a minute can be challenging. And that's something to notice. I'd like you to write for not 4 minutes as it says on this slide, but just for 2 minutes, describing what archetype you think this card is trying to point you to. And does it have any relationship to any of the other archetypes you've already listed? Is it hitting something on your list? Just take 2 minutes, make a few notes. Take another half a minute to add any additional thoughts, any details about this card you want to remember. And as we finish up, I would love for anyone who would like to share in the chat something from this activity that felt fruitful for you. So you can share an archetype that you noticed in your writing. You can share the card that you pulled. You can share any confusion or feeling or excitement that came up.
I will.
Great.
I pulled the King of Cups from the Light Seers Tarot.
Mhm.
And what I got from him, what came up was the heart-centered seeker. Because for the first time ever, I noticed the little boat off to the side heading away. And I think that's something that I can very much work with in my writing this year, is being the heart-centered seeker.
What does that mean for you?
Probably writing more creative non-fiction about what it's like to be an autistic person in the world.
Yeah, that's an amazing and encouraging message from that card.
I think that's a big push to me, like, okay, here's your assignment for the year.
Yeah, I think our general understanding of autism and neurodiversity is lacking, and I think personal stories like yours and others can help more people understand the many different ways of perception. And I love this heart-centered seeker as a driver in your storytelling. Thank you, Helen.
I'll share mine. So I got the Eight of Cups, which is not a card that's shown up for me in spreads before. And what I think is really cool about it is, even though the meaning is sort of negative, it's abandonment of success, it's turning away from good things in your life and going into danger. I like that in this particular card, the art of this particular card, the person who's walking away, we can't see their face. The only other figure in the card is the moon, who is in position to actually see perhaps any kind of expression on the face of the person who is turning away from what they had. And so it just has me thinking about point of view, about thinking about why someone would make the decisions that they would in their life, and how perhaps a point of view from a certain ways askance of that character could help explain that.
Okay, awesome. I want to add to that card that I also see it as choosing to turn away from something after you've kind of gotten everything you needed from it. Like, on its face, this is a good situation, but for this individual, they're ready to kind of seek something more challenging or a new learning experience. So that just goes to show like how many different interpretations are out there, and some of them could be completely opposite. And what you're doing when you look at the card and notice the details is building your own relationship with this card. And over time, you'll begin to see that one archetype can actually have many different possible meanings, all of which may be true and could be applied one by one to different situations. So in this way, tarot can help us go deeper into our work. Like, what am I exploring? Why am I connected to, why am I so curious about this archetype? Like, what am I trying to work out by exploring it? And what do I want people to see about this archetype? How can I complicate it or add something new to it? So that's really like going down into the basement of your work and really thinking about what's down there and what's motivating you to be creating around this question or around this archetype or these various archetypes that are in conversation with each other. Obviously, depending on the kind of work you're doing, you don't want archetypes to be so obvious and visible. They'll have more subtlety, but it's nice for you to know kind of where you're going and why. And so if this is your first time reading a tarot card, congratulations, you just learned how to read one without actually learning tarot. So just to review, what I would encourage you to do as you start working with the cards is to sit with your deck, get still, calm your nervous system a little bit, take some deep breaths, get centered, connect with your deck, and acknowledge the fact that you're seeking help, you're seeking insight, that you want to be receiving messages, maybe give gratitude, whatever feels natural for you, and then bring your question forward. Bring that to the top of your mind. If you're speaking out loud, certainly speak it. And then pull a card as you like. So whether you want to spread out a fan, just pull it straight out of the stack, thumb through it, whatever feels normal. You can do it differently every time. If you're very new, I would encourage you to ignore whether the card is upside down or right side up and just focus on a right side up version. Then look at your card really closely. Study it for a full minute. It's really easy to like pull a card, try to get a quick impression, make a decision around what you think it means, and decide to feel excited or disappointed in that, and then kind of move on. But there's a lot more richness I think you can pull out of a card if you give it some time, if you give yourself some space to really look and connect. There are still cards when I pull them where I notice something new visually about them that I didn't before. And then take a minute to write. As a writer, why not write down some notes? And then let yourself be curious about what you received. So kind of think about keeping the card in your energetic back pocket. To come back to it, you could put it on your desk so you can see it and interact with it, continue to process it, see how things are unfolding over time. I also encourage everyone to keep like a notebook for this kind of work so that you can look back and see how certain cards showed up for you, how they played out over a week or 2 weeks or even several months. Sean said, I like the aspect of studying a card closely for a long period. Yes, there's stuff you miss when you, and Helen saying there's stuff you miss when you give a quick look and jump straight to the meaning, which is also such a human tendency. We want to just be like, I got this figured out. I know what this means. Let me like cut to the chase instead of let me listen. Let me see what I notice. So I would encourage you to continue that. You can add on tarot study later. If you do start to study tarot, I would encourage you, in another version of this class, I kind of got into these things, but I think maybe we have richer work to do tonight. So these are things to notice. This would be a good slide to screenshot the text of maybe. As you start studying the cards, if you want to get to know them more historically or structurally, I wouldn't necessarily go straight to trying to like read all the different definitions and meanings that are out there and trying to like retain all of that information, because it is a lot, which is a lot of reasons, or a big reason why like I didn't mess with tarot for a long time. I was like, I don't have time to learn all that. But you don't have to. So the things you can start to notice to help you understand tarot from a bigger picture view would be the structure of the deck. There's a part of the deck that's very much like our playing cards. Then there's some extra cards called the major arcana. The minor arcana are kind of like the 52 cards that we normally see, an ace to a 10 up to a king with an extra court card. There are 4 suits in the tarot: the wands, the swords, the pentacles, and cups. They each correspond to a different element, respectively. The wands are fire, the swords are air, the pentacles are earth, the cups are water, and then each of those elements has a metaphorical meaning. Fire is life force, air is the mind and communication, earth is resources and substance and nourishment, and water is emotion. So that's like real foundational tarot kind of stuff. So if you pull a cups card, you can say, oh, I know this is about emotions, and then you can start your investigation from there without having to know all of this information. So those are things to look for if you want to keep learning. It's a good place to begin. One reason, yet another reason, tarot is an incredibly powerful tool is because it forces us to ask questions. And I'm going to start with a real big one, a real broad one. Why are you here tonight? What made you come to this class? Where are you with your writing self that you would come to Tarot for Writers? Where have you been? Where do you want to go? What feels like it's blocking you? And you did a little bit of this when you were introducing yourself at the beginning of the workshop. I'm going to make this 4 minutes instead of 5. But see what comes out when you ask yourself these questions writing. Where am I? Where am I going? Where do I want to go? take about 20 more seconds if you're still writing. And I'm going to leave that there for just a moment. And I want to bring us back to Carl Jung, who said wisely, to ask the right question is already half the solution to the problem, half the solution of a problem, which I find to be incredibly true. So sometimes I'll be doing a reading for someone and they're describing a situation that's very complicated or, has a lot of nuance, different players, different factors. And as I'm listening and as we're talking, it may come from me, it may come from them. But by the end, we land on a question that sort of encapsulates what it is they're needing to know in order to make a determination about the situation. So when we get stuck in something, whether it's relational or our own creative work or some kind of bureaucratic or systemic situation, we get really caught up in the details and like what's happening down here on the ground and who's doing what and why and what it means about me or them. And it's just a lot to hold in your mind, and we keep like swirling around it and nothing good actually maybe comes from it. We're just like ping-ponging here and there until we can finally come down to like, what's the question at the heart of the situation for me? And suddenly, once you know the question, it really does feel like you are almost close, so close to finding the answer, because you've taken all of that stuff that's in your mind, all of these different factors and layers and whatever is troubling you, and you've boiled it down to its essence. And when you get to that essential part, there you have a pathway for clarity and movement. So working with tarot can be so powerful because it brings us into this activity or this exercise of formulating a question that can help us. And when we know what we're wanting to know, then we can start looking for the answer. And that's not to say we're going to find it written in a book magically, and we just follow the instructions. But once we know what kind of seeking we're doing, we can start taking ourselves in a direction that will be helpful to us. So there are a few good ways to ask questions of the tarot and some that I would encourage you to avoid. And in terms of asking good questions, you want to focus on questions that are open-ended, usually questions that begin with how, what, why. So how can I do X, Y, or Z? How will I know if it's a good time to blah, blah, blah? How should I go about responding to this person? What questions? What can I do to engender more peace and love in my relationships? What is missing from my creative life? What am I so angry about? What do I need to see about this? Or why questions? Why am I feeling so stuck? Why is it important for me to finish this book? Why do I struggle to show up every day? Whatever the questions, these are some great examples. Questions you don't want to be asking are yes or no. Will I publish my book? Because there's not a yes card and there's not a no card. Will I or won't I? Anything that's kind of binary, one or the other, those aren't the best questions for tarot. And another reason to avoid questions like this is that, yes or no, will I or won't I? That's a question for you. Will you or won't you? You still have free will. There are obviously certain things, certain constraints in this world, but we have a lot of choice. So your future is still being written by you in collaboration with the universe. So even though the universe may have answers, it also needs you to show up and participate. So it's a collaborative effort There's not someone just saying like, yes, your book will be published just automatically. Questions about timing are difficult because there are no timekeepers really in tarot. Sometimes you can say, like in a reading, I think the cards are probably relevant for either like a lunar cycle or a couple months. You can kind of feel into those things and see how that works for you. And I would also avoid trying to read for other people's motivations, feelings, problems, etc. I mean, you may start conducting readings for your friends who are wanting to get clarity through tarot. Great, do that. But if you and a friend want to read for like that guy who's acting weird and figure out what's, that's a lot of speculation, and we didn't get his consent to figure out what his deal is, right? So try to focus on you. You're the only person that you have agency over. So let your questions be directed around that. Concluding that mini lesson on question asking, I would love for you to read over what you've written about where you are with your writer self and formulate one question that seems most pressing. Like, what's at the heart of where you are right now in terms of your writing? If you could take a question to a genie and say like, how can I do this? Or what am I needing to do? Whatever the case may be, what's the one question you would want to have answered? When you have your question, I would love for you to share it in the chat if you're comfortable doing that. Kat says she's picturing her writing as a room. Why can't I just open the door and walk in? Great question. I love the metaphor contained in the question too. How can I rekindle a sense of fun in my relationship with writing? How can I support a gentle return to writing? I like that word, gentle. If you know that you need something smoother and softer, ask for that. How can I regain my faith in writing? Great question too. I think even just contained in that question, how can I regain my faith in my writing, means the desire is there, and that's going to take you a long way. So that's wonderful. What else can momentum look like for me right now? Great question. We think about productivity and what it's supposed to look like, but what should it look like for you individually? How can I use tarot to help with writing bios for my character? Okay, great question. What is it I'm building with my writing? These are all beautiful. Okay. Now that you have your question, I would love for you to pull a card. So follow that same process that you did before. Oh, yeah, I love this question. How can I be both a good writer and a good mother? Yes, Beth, you can be. Of course you can be. And you know what, when I see this question, how can I be both a good writer and a good mother? Then we really get to the root of like what the struggle is. I'm trying to be good at both of these things, and I'm not sure that I'm doing that. How will I know? And you really understand what your struggle is. Is it this or that? How do I balance? Very clarifying. So pull a card, look at it for that full minute, and write for 3 minutes about how this card is responding to your question. What do you think it's trying to tell you? Trust that the card is on your side. So even if you get a menacing looking card, think about what it means to work with this energy and get free of it, to heal it, to change it. So be listening for answers that are benevolent and supportive for you, even if the card looks not so peaceful. Amy is asking if I'm looking for two things, ease and play, should I separate them? It's up to you. If you feel like they're separate, if you want them all in an energetic package, then you might just pull one card because the answer may be one thing. So it's up to you. Either way is good. Follow your intuition. Okay. Wasn't a whole lot of time, but if there's anyone who's interested in sharing the card they received, what you feel like it means to you, how it speaks to you. Okay, Helen's included a comment. I'm flummoxed. I am building ... justice. I would take that, Helen, to have something to do with your values. Justice is about, yeah, where we place our values and what kind of action we place behind our values. So you mentioned earlier having the King of Cups, maybe sharing more of your story around living with autism. I could see that having a connection to your sense of justice, that by sharing your story, other people with similar experiences might see more recognition and understanding in the world. And that's like maybe you want to use your voice to create, more inclusivity and fairness and understanding. So that would be an example. So thinking about like, what are your values? How do you want to enact them? Some of the major arcana cards like Justice are hard because they don't have necessarily a story going on in the picture. They're very archetypal. So we have to kind of think like, what does justice mean for me? Casey's heading out. Bye, Casey. Thanks for coming. Anyone else want to share something about the card you pulled and the message you're taking from it?
I'll share. I asked, how can I regain my faith in my writing? And I got the Fool, which I thought was very apt because it's about being innocent and unafraid to fail, and like walking into the unknown. So I thought that was like a really spot on message.
Awesome. Yes. And sometimes when you're hungering for that like new direction and you just see it in an image rather than having someone try to like talk you into something, it just hits you kind of viscerally and it really has a powerful impact in a way that other things don't. Kat says, I was really moved by my card, the Four of Wands. This strong sense of welcome, you're welcome here. And Kat is the one who asked, why can't I open the door to this room of my writing and just walk in? So Four of Wands saying, welcome, you're welcome here. It's not a walled up place. It's warm and sunny. It's living flowers instead of glass. Just that sense of knowing that I'm welcome feels revelatory. Yes. And we'll take some work, I'm sure. Yeah. So sometimes it's not just the answer. It's also like, can I receive this really beautiful message? Because sometimes we're like, I'm welcome. Really? And that shows us we have some work to do on receiving an invitation and feeling welcome where we go. Yes, Sean asked, what am I sharing with my writing? And got the 10 of Cups, which is a really uplifting message of sharing joy and play. Yes. Cool. Okay. I'm going to move us forward and just kind of check in and review what we've done so far. You have used tarot to identify deeper threads in your work when we talked about archetypes. You used tarot to zero in on a key question and receive guidance around that question, which is really the whole name of the game. You've practiced reading a card you probably maybe don't know. And now we're going to use tarot to help us generate work. I don't know if we're going to have time for both of these fully, though we might. So I'll try to shorten things here and there to make sure we can stay on track. Let me check in actually, like, how is this pace? Is this much tarot too much? Not enough? Are you ready for more? How are we feeling? Give me a 5 if you're like, I'm ready for more tarot. Give it to me. Give me a 1 if you're like, okay. Looking good. And you don't have to put 5 just to follow along. Okay, Megan's a 4. Okay, mostly good. Thank y'all. All right, so we're gonna build on this a little bit. And I have 3 different spreads for you here. So we've already talked about different ways you can use tarot to kind of work on your own, to kind of feed your creative spirit. Like, what is your creative spirit needing? What kind of reassurance? What kind of deeper level inquiry do you need to do to kind of even get you to a place where you want to be writing? And then when you are ready to write, sometimes we don't know what we want to say, but we know we want to get the juices flowing. We know that it's been a while. We need to stretch those or work those muscles. So here are 3 card spreads that you could try to kind of show you, to kind of create a writing prompt for yourself. So the first one would be beginning, middle, end, where you have these 3 cards in a row and you kind of look at them conceptually as the big 3 chunks of a story. What would a story like that look like what could be some of the possibilities or specifics of that story. You can do another one that's who, where, and why. So maybe a persona type or an energetic type. Where are they and what are they doing there? And what kind of story does that inspire? Another one is if this, then what would happen? And then your third card could be a change that would result from that cause and effect. Which might be an interesting puzzle to try to put together depending on what you get. Another one is a card for right now, a card like wherever the character may be at this moment, a card for their desire, and a card for their outcome, which helps you imagine some plot points that can link those things together. And another one being something to avoid for the character, something to embrace, and then a struggle for the character around doing one or both of those things. So choose a spread you want to try. This could become a very extended thing if it really does resonate for you and you're like, wow, I have a whole story idea suddenly. We're not going to get through that tonight. So choose a spread, pull the cards, study them as you've done tonight, and jot down any ideas, kind of like make a sketch for yourself. I'm going to give us 5 minutes instead of 10, and then we'll come back together. If you have questions in the chat, leave them there. Keep an eye on that. Take about 30 more seconds to write down any ideas or information you want to keep from the spread. Okay. How did that feel? Confusing, exciting, something to mull over? I can see how this could help me as a writer. This is too weird.
I like that. When I first turned over the cards, it was hard to see how they all kind of went together, but the more I looked at them and thought about them, sort of a nice little narrative emerged. And even if that narrative itself doesn't become a story, I think that there are certain ideas there that could find their way into something.
Awesome. Yeah, just once you give the card some time to talk to you and let your brain not jump in immediately, you can start, yeah, like mulling over different possibilities and connective tissue. And it doesn't have to be like a story you end up spending several months writing. It could be one that's just fun to think about or talk about with friends or roommates. It just kind of gets the storytelling juices flowing. Helen said it helped me tackle the blank page in terms of a journal call out. I now have the bud of an idea. Awesome. Yes, Beth, not enough time to think it all through right now, but love the idea and want to revisit. Awesome. So you can also take a screenshot of this slide in particular, if it feels like something you want to come back to. And these are some examples of 3-card spreads, but you can make up your own and have fun with it. And just making up a spread is a creative act. So you're already in it. Turi says, it was interesting to see the visual similarities between cards and connect those through a short poem for me. Awesome. That's something, I'm glad you said that, because that's something I wanted to say. I don't know if it's in my notes as this class goes on or if I missed it before, but looking at, if there are figures in your cards, looking at how they're oriented toward another, looking at any continuity in terms of like the horizon or colors, but also contrasts in that regard too. So you might see like the Empress next to the Knight of Wands, who appears to be like running away from her or something, which would give you one kind of story versus the Empress and the Knight of Swords, who's like charging at her at great speed. Cool to use these to provide some structure for an idea that doesn't have much form yet. Yes. So these can give you some bare bones that you can come back to, just little story generators, things to get you thinking. Sometimes if you don't have time to write and sit down and be with the language, this is something to do just as a thinking activity. Okay. Cool. Surprisingly exciting. Things clicked pretty quickly once I started. Awesome. So if tarot is a psychological tool, can't we use it to psychologize our characters? The answer is yes, absolutely. I find it can help you go even deeper than a lot of the other exercises that you'll find in books or that you learn in creative writing classes or creative writing programs. That's not to say that those exercises are not valuable. And they may be way more valuable to you than this. So, but I feel like this comes at it in a different way that unlocks for me more than some of those other things do, where I still feel like I'm having to be in my mind. My mind is feeble, so I need something else. And And I will also say that understanding characters is extremely hard. Like, these are completely made up people, usually. Of course, we might be basing them on someone, but we also are using some creative liberty, right? These are people we've never met in one sense, sort of like, you know, maybe they remind us of a certain kind of person we've had in our life, but we haven't met this one character. And imaginatively, they have lived many years before you even begin working with them usually. So how much do you really know about this character? And isn't it challenging to try and know nearly everything about them as someone who's making them up, right, as you go? I find it incredibly difficult. So I am going to obnoxiously quote myself. I got to participate in this roundtable that was published in LitHub. It was called Why Writers Are Particularly Drawn to Tarot. Alexander Chi was part of the conversation, so you should go read it. I'll put the link in the chat in a second, and you should read what he has to say and all of the other great practitioners. I just kind of like how I happen to articulate something I feel is really important about all of this. The question was like, are more people turning to tarot to develop their creativity, free themselves from writer's block? And I said, yes, like all those reasons, but more. People seem hungry for spiritual practices they can personalize, and more people are realizing that tarot is a form of therapy, one you can use entirely on your own without needing another human to mediate the process. I was drawn to tarot because it shares with writing a fundamental aspiration to articulate the complexity of human experience. Writers must journey into the murky realms of the subconscious and return with material the conscious mind can digest. Tarot can enter this process as a collaborator and complement. It shares a writer's desire to interrogate while providing a different language and angle for doing so. I'm noticing more writers embracing tarot as a tool for navigating that subconscious space. When we feel stuck, we can turn to tarot for insights or alternatives, then language can flow into that space. The work of writing and using language as your material all the time, I don't know how it is for other kinds of artists in different mediums. Maybe it's the same, but it feels, it's a lot to build with because the words are abstract. They don't even always represent the idea or the emotion that we are trying to convey and that we only understand as an internal experience. So it's a lot of heavy lifting. And I think tarot gives us a break from that. It lets us go deep into the creative space and kind of dredge up things in a more raw form that we don't have to put language on right away. Oh, we're hearing a birthday song. This is for...
Hold on.
That's awesome. And happy birthday once again. So yeah, tarot can help us get at this stuff in a different way. And I want to show you this image, which looks very like something from The Ring or something. But in the past, I've tried to like draw this metaphor for what I feel like we're having to do with our characters. So here's our character, let's say, standing on the dock. And the story that will be written about this character will deal with the house that's on the shore that we can't see, the character's movements in that house, the character's movements on the dock, maybe the movements in a boat. Maybe we'll talk about some of the natural world and some of the animals living in the space. But I'm going to charge this lake that's laid out in front as the subconscious lived memory of this character. So it's deep and we can only see the surface. And most of what we're writing about is going to be surface stuff. It's what the characters are doing and saying, how they're behaving. It's not going to go necessarily into all the psychology, but the more that we as the writer know about what the character is bringing to the situation psychologically, the better off we'll be writing scenes in which the character seems consistent or the character makes sense to the reader. The motivations become more knowable when the actions, behaviors, language, and thoughts of the character kind of coalesce around what you understand to be the character's main motivation or struggle or fear. But it's a lot to, like I said, build out a fictional person with all of this subconscious material that's contained in what is I'm projecting onto the lake in this image. So what I am going to show you next is a spread that has 10 cards in it. It's a big one. You are not expected to do this whole spread right now. In fact, if tarot is new to you, if you're like, I'm still digesting the thing we just did, then I would not try to pull cards with all of this. I would just kind of listen and start to get oriented around what the spread is like. And then you can screenshot the end screen so you see the whole thing, and you can try it on your own time when you feel ready. So I encourage you to just listen. Don't even necessarily need to take notes, just kind of like watch, and that's part of your process, and it's really important. If you are like working with tarot all the time and you're like, I'm ready, this full moon has me charged up, go ahead and pull cards if you want to. But do what feels your speed and check in with yourself right now. If you are going to go for this and pull cards, make sure you choose a character first. Or if you're like not working on anything and you wish you had some characters and you're going to pull cards, you can start crafting or trying to imagine a new character. Like I said, there's a lot of cards. It's a lot to constellate. So I would maybe make sure that you're giving yourself enough time in the future to sit down with this. But it's great to focus on a single character, usually your protagonist, though you can do it with other characters as well. I'd start with your protagonist anyway, or be open. I've done this spread before and I was like, wow, this could be a whole novel. Like there's a lot in here to help you kind of move forward with a concept or a big storyline, partly because stories are character driven. So the more that you can see about your character, the more you can see a story unfolding. And just know that you'll need time to process the information, and there's more support available from me around this if that's something you want, and I'll talk about that later. Okay, are you all ready? So on the left side, you're going to see what the spread looks like. I don't have little rectangles for every card, but you're generally going to see the layout. So the first card is just where your character is at the moment that the story probably opens, where their life is right now, what's going on for them, kind of the mood, the vibe, so forth. If you have questions as I'm going through this, please put them in the chat. Your second card is an external influence, and I turned the number 2 sideways because it's kind of crossing that first card in a way. Sometimes you'll do that in tarot spread where like one card is actually perpendicular to the first one to show that kind of overlap. So this is an external influence of some kind. It could be something in the town where the character lives, something in their home environment. It could represent a parent, it could represent a spouse, but something that's adding to what, that's putting pressure, putting influence on the character, whether it's the job, climate conditions, whatever the case may be. Then we're going to start moving into the character's past, which is why we're moving to the left here. So card number 3 sits to the left of card number 1, and it represents the recent past. So what was kind of different if you don't go too far back in time with this character? What were they doing before? What was life like then? You can look at card 3 and 1 and see, have things improved? Are they just kind of different? Have things gone downhill? And your card number 4 is going to go even further back in the past, the deep past. So this, if you have adult characters, would refer to things maybe in childhood. And you know, as a writer, you have to make a lot of decisions around what kind of information makes it into your story. And that's based on what kind of information is relevant. It depends on the size of the story you're telling. If you have a novel, yeah, you can devote a whole chapter to going back to the character's family of origin at an earlier time in life, if that's something that feels important. But this kind of deep past stuff may not be something that you actually explicitly talk about in the world of your story. But if you, as the writer, know about it, then you know what kind of upbringing this character had, what kind of stories they were taught, what kind of narratives and concepts are governing their perception of themselves and the world. And the more you know about that, the more you have a sense of like, you know, if this person's really insecure, like if this character was raised going to gymnastics tournaments at a very young age, and they had to perform exquisitely well because of this pressure, then what would their life be like if they're in a situation where there's no external pressure to make them perform? What do they do to themselves, for example? So the deep past can be helpful in that way. Your next card is the waking mind. So when your character wakes up in the morning, when they're bored at work, when they're driving around these days, when they're going to like visit friends or pick up children, what's on their mind that they are aware of? The dialogue that's running through their head, the lists of things they feel like they have to do, the complaints that maybe are bouncing around in their mind. And then below, you have the buried thoughts. So these would be concerns, worries, stories, thought patterns that are kind of running on autopilot, or they're in the deep background of this character's consciousness. So the character may not even be aware that these kinds of thoughts or stories or patterns or imprints are affecting how they move, do, behave. But it's good for you to know what's really going on as like a deep preoccupation for the character. And that's a really rich place because you can start to show the reader perhaps what some of these buried thoughts are, and the character still isn't aware of them. So there's a kind of dramatic tension between what the reader can see and what the character is aware of, and whether those two will ultimately join at some point in the story. Card 7 is your character's aspiration or desire. So this would be a huge engine for your story. Desire is the name of the game in storytelling. There's always something that is wanted, whether it's a literal thing or an abstract kind of concept. What is the character craving, even if they're not fully aware of what it is they're after? We are compelled by our yearnings and desires, even when we're trying to suppress them. So that's a huge source of narrative motivation and narrative movement. Then you have card 8, which is an obstacle to the character's desire. So you can see card 2 and card 8 are both tilted on their side because they're both these added pressure points. So the character wants this, but what's going to be pushing at them to make them either fight for it or potentially change their desire. Card 9 is a place of reckoning. So this could represent kind of your climax in a story. This is where all of the things, obviously this tarot spread doesn't represent every scene or aspect of a story, but a lot of the underlying and very present aspects of the character and the external environment in which they exist are going to come to a head. And what's that going to look like? Where is it going to go down? What kind of energy does it have? Will it be soft and subtle? Will it be like the tower where stuff's like blown up? And then your final card is the outcome. So the nature of the change for the character. That's what, you know, in a fictional story, also in a memoir, slightly different in a memoir because it's not like, and then I changed and the end. There's human lives don't move exactly the way that narratives do. But how is the character changed by moving through this journey of desire, obstacle, fighting for, or resigning to? What realization comes for them? How are they different now than they are in card number 1? So there's a lot here. But it can be a very fruitful spread. And I'm curious if anyone in this group has been pulling cards as we went. Also, what questions do you have? Also, you may want to take a screenshot of this one. No questions? Give me a 5 if you're like, I'm going to try this tomorrow. Give me a 1 if you're like, this is too much. And then there's 4, 3, 2. Cool. All right, feeling some excitement. That's good. Okay. Yeah, so hopefully that didn't freak you out. Pulled cards for a 10-line poem. Nice. Jotted down what I pulled, but I've already learned something about my character. Awesome. Yeah, even if you can't take it all in at once, there's usually something that pops out where you're like, oh, okay. So to review, why is tarot good for writers? So as you can see, it is a storytelling device. It is something that your mind cannot totally control. And I think that's a good thing, because we get really wound up. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves to control the narrative that we're making. We are technically in control of it as the creator. But if we get way too in our mind and our minds get tired, our minds are preoccupied by other things, our minds have to do other work during the day, it can be a lot. And so it's nice to turn it over to something else, which is really what's happening when we're in the flow of creativity anyway. In my estimation, I don't think we create as individual entities. I think we are in communion with something that's larger than us, like the creative force that created this earth and humans and all of the creatures. Tarot puts us in a position of curiosity, which immediately takes us into a space of openness rather than contraction. When we're worrying through something and we're like, we have that like biting our nails, hunching our shoulders energy, it's hard to move forward like this. But if we're curious, we have more ease and openness. Tarot speaks to us in another language. It takes that pressure off of the language that we speak and write in for a time. Tarot is pretty affordable, so we can all have a deck. It travels really well. And I know sometimes we writers have to like run off, pack lightly, spontaneously go somewhere and find inspiration. So it travels in your bag very easily. It never gets boring. I'm still doing this and now doing this full time because it's so interesting to me. Maybe not to everyone else, but I will say it's not boring. It cares about the human experience. And I think that's an important thing. You are a writer because you care about the human experience. What is going on for us? What does it mean to be human? How do we deal with this life that is so strange and filled with struggle and filled with longing and desire? Tarot wants to ask those questions too. It's not trying to judge you. Tarot is here to support you. I don't find that the cards are ever scolding me, judging me. Sometimes they'll give me some real talk and I'm like, yeah, that's true. True story, tarot. I have to accept that. It wants us to grow, succeed, find joy. What else did I leave off this list? Why is tarot good for writers? Anything I didn't think of?
I think, as evidenced by events like this, it can introduce you to a community. And I think, me in particular, and a lot of writers need that in order to keep pushing ourselves forward and keep creating work. And so it's good to have sort of a common language and things that bring people together to say like, oh, have you tried this spread, or what do you think about this card? And I think that's really valuable.
Thank you for saying that. Building community and bringing people together is a very important part of this project for me. So of course, I left it off the list. Also, tarot has allowed me to meet so many interesting and amazing people and have so many cool conversations, powerful conversations where I'm learning, the other person is learning, we're both sharing and connecting. It has enriched my life in ways I can't even describe. So I'm really glad you brought that up. And I want this to be a communal space where we can come and experiment and make magic together and connect around this stuff. Helen is seeking a writing buddy. She's an experienced reader. Cool. So if you're looking for that, say hi to Helen on the DM. Anything else? Why tarot is so good for us writers?
I just like the way it forces you to think about images rather than words, which I feel like if you're into analytical of a headspace when you're writing, it can become a trap. So I like that aspect of it.
Thank you. Yes, it's very freeing. Okay. So just in case, if you're new to this, maybe tarot for you is like astrology for me, where like, I really want to know astrology. I wish I could like read people's charts and do all of that. And maybe one day I will. And I still learn about it. I go slowly, like I pick up things that kind of come up in my Instagram, or I listen to the podcast sometimes, but all those moving planets and a huge vastness of space and the angles and the houses and the signs, I'm like, I'll never get it. And I feel overwhelmed if I think about it. And I feel like this could happen with tarot too. And I don't want that to happen for you because all those great reasons that we just shared. So use it at a pace that feels right for you. Your pace may change. Sometimes I'm pulling a card every day. Sometimes I'm pulling cards on the new moon and the full moon, and that's about it. So do what feels right for you. Give yourself time to connect with the cards before you move into a study kind of mode. Take the cards personally, take them seriously, but don't take them too personally. Remember that they're here to help you. I never want you to come away from a tarot experience feeling discouraged. So always let yourself look for the best possible. I don't mean like toxic positivity every card that you see, but don't jump to the worst conclusion first, is what I'm saying. Try to find, what would your dear friend, imagine tarot as like a fairy godmother. What is your fairy godmother trying to tell you with this card? She's not going to tell you like, you can't do that and you're not good enough and you're a mess. She's going to say like, why don't you think about this? give yourself time to watch the card play out. So even if you've looked at the card, maybe you looked at some websites and you're like, I don't get it. That's okay. Be patient, see what time reveals for you. And like I said, I also encourage you to keep track of your readings, even write down some of the symbols, draw, get artistic with it. I have a book where I just do that. And it's so interesting to me to go back and see what certain cards meant and how they were talking to each other. And that's the best way to study is to use them. So just use them when you can and you want to, and study when you feel like it. These are some resources I would suggest. 78 Degrees of Wisdom is a beautiful book by the writer Rachel Pollack. I would mainly focus on the major arcana descriptions because they're very spiritual, very rich. Those archetypes, like I said, are hard to kind of connect with because they don't show a story. So they just kind of present a person. So that's a really great read for understanding the major arcana cards. Biddy Tarot is like an Australian tarot empress. She has a whole empire. I'm not sure I fully love her whole business, but she has card descriptions on her website that are pretty thorough. There's a few podcasts here that you might try out. This Jungian Life is not about tarot. It's some Jungian analysts who talk about different archetypes in ways that are so fascinating to me. And then if you're not already a Typewriter Tarot member, our membership program is a great way to get more support, receive tarot spreads, guided rituals. If you are a member and you like it and you want to say anything about that in the chat, no pressure, but you may. And then if this is the kind of thing that you're craving, if what you experienced tonight feels like something you need more of, I wanted to tell you about a few things. First, our next event is called Creative Coven. And this is something new. We're kind of, drop those resources in the chat. Megan's calling out the Creative Tarot by Jesse Crispin. Thank you, Megan. Creative Coven is going to be a monthly gathering where we come together to kind of feed, heal, and nourish our creative spirit. So there's the work itself, but then there's all the baggage that we bring to the work, which is how we're feeling today, what's going on in our lives, what our parents led us to believe about what it meant to be a creative person, productivity, capitalism, all this stuff is not always encouraging us to live our most creative, fulfilled life. And Creative Coven is a place where we can examine some of that, dismantle some of that, get free of that. We'll also do tarot together. I'll usually guide you through a meditation. We'll do some talking and kind of problem solving as a group. And this one will be focused on Aquarius season, which is starting in just a few days. And Aquarians are kind of the rebels, the big dreamers, very aspirational. So we're going to work on dreaming big. We're going to work on giving ourselves a rich creative life. We're going to talk about the star card. So that's next Tuesday. All of this stuff is on our website. And we just started offering a service where you pull cards for yourself. And if you want some added support from a tarot reader, then you can send your spread to me and I will do an audio recording where I look at your cards and tell you what I'm seeing. Usually these are $40, like as they are on our website, they're $40 for 8 cards, or as many as 8 cards. And you get a 10 to 15 minute recording. For y'all tonight, if you want to do this character spread that we just did and you want some support, that's 10 cards with the recording. I'm going to give y'all $5 off. Your code is right here, writer22, and it's good until February 22nd, 2022. 22 is my favorite number. It's my magic number. And so you have plenty of time to do the spread, come back to it, think about it, decide if this is something you want. You're welcome to use that. Typewriter Tarot membership. I've already told you a little bit about that. Right now, the pricing for membership is really accessible. It's going to change a little bit soon. So if you want to try it out now and see what it's like, you can get in there for $2 a month. And then we have a retreat coming up. It was going to actually happen this past Saturday, but we decided to play it safe with Omicron, and we are moving it to March 2nd. So the wildflowers will be blooming. We have a beautiful space in Wimberley, Texas, lots of nature. And we'll be working with the themes of spring using tarot, helping you rest, reflect, restore, get creative, be in community. So all of that is on our site, and I would love to see all of you again. I'm going to hang out for, a few minutes, and I can answer any questions that y'all have about what we talked about tonight or anything else. And I will stop the recording.